this world. We are a daughter, we are a son. When I cross the line, the race is run. Life's for living, and I am one.
It was wonderful, wondering how far we could go. We shared the wind, the sun and the snow. Traveled the world, the sights and sounds. As the arms of the clock move round and round.
Your father was a doctor.
Yes.
So what was that like as a child growing up with your dad?
We were more open-minded, I think. Maybe that was because my father was a doctor and he liked to call a spade a spade. We lived in Weymouth at that time. My father had a practice there. And there was a maid who took me out for a walk on the beach. And the Salvation Army were there. And I used to be helped onto a pile of sand and sing, God, if you please, go down on your knees, and God, if you please, I'll get down on my knees and my cup will run over with joy. That was at 3.
Age 3?
Yes.
Oh wow. You remember at age of 3?
Yes, I do. I mean, I remember that particular occasion.
But you said you were taken to the beach by the maid.
Yes.
Did you have maids and cleaners all the time?
Yes, all the time.
So you grew up, would you say you grew up in a privileged life?
Definitely, yes. But you see, the maids weren't allowed to be involved with the practice. And so Daddy decided that it would be a very good idea if we had a lot to do with it.
So he wanted the children to help him
Yes.
in the practice. So
Yes.
your mum helped him as well, did she?
No, she didn't. That was the strange thing. That was a bit old-fashioned. She had people to help her in the house. And she didn't ever have anything to do with the practice until he was ill at the end. But my sister and I, knew and handed out the bottles if they were ready and the patients had come to the door. And then we took the patients in from the waiting room to the consulting room.
And how old were you then, Heather?
Well, it was over a long span.
So what age did you start helping your dad in his surgery?
7-ish.
7 years old?
Yes.
Wow. And how old was your sister?
Well, she was a bit younger actually. I mean, I know she answered the telephone when it would be roughly when she got to 7, I think. She probably answered the telephone.
So tell me the sort of jobs that you did besides, did you answer the phones and
Yes.
get the medicines together?
We never touched the medicines. My father made up all the medicine.
Oh, he did?
Oh, yes.
And where did he do that?
In the old days, because it was an enormous, lovely house. It had been the place where the servants sort of dished up and things and brought out the food.
And you used to answer the phone?
Yes.
So what would you say?
We were taught that we must get their name, their address, and what was wrong with them. And then we had to say, I'll ask my father as soon as he comes back, could you give me your telephone number, please? But there were pitifully few people who had the telephone, because the people in the big houses on the hill sent down a skivvy to say, come and see the doctor.
A skivvy.
Yes.
That's a very old-fashioned word, isn't it?
It is, yes.
It's quite nice though.
Yes.
Heather, just describe what your father's surgery was like and how you saw it as a child.
Well, it was very grand. Front door steps, very broad, coming up into the main door. And the patients did come in that way because it was a huge, great door, and that was the best way. And then there was, you could call it, it wasn't really a room, it was a big space. And we put a whole lot of benches in there for the patients, because they could come down and see my father without, I mean, they might knock on the door. But if the surgery hours were open, they just came in. They didn't have to make an appointment. And so they came in and sat on these benches. But anybody who, this is terrible, anybody who was a friend as well as a patient was invited into the second drawing room. We had two drawing rooms and one drawing room, and we did come to recognise who to not mix with the hoi polloi. I know it's dreadful, but it didn't seem dreadful then.
So you had a sort of like a first-class waiting room and a second-class waiting room.
Well, the second-class waiting room was the big one, and then there was a second drawing room. We had a big drawing room which was kept for parties and things like that. And the second drawing room, we took friends in, and my mother might have been in there sort of knitting or something, and she would always get up and say, "Oh, how lovely to see you, come in. Thank you so much, Heather." And then I had to tell Daddy what order they were in, because he didn't see one of those patients before one of the others. He would, first come, first served.
So what sort of dramas did you have? Did the waiting room get full up and busy?
Yes, and he was called out in the middle of it, and then we had to cope. So
in your father's waiting room, I mean, how many people would you have sort of waiting?
Nobody was not ill because they didn't have enough money, and in those days they had this. It wasn't expensive, but if they didn't have the money, they couldn't. They couldn't go to the surgery at all.
So
I mean, my father wouldn't have known about them, but it didn't happen very often because he was terribly popular, and also he didn't charge the poorer people practically nothing at all. But they knew that if you go down and see the doctor, you have to pay something, and they were country people who had no money.
So how did you sum up life as a child with the country doctor being your father? Was it exciting?
Terribly exciting. We hero worshipped him, literally, and he hero worshipped us. So that was a nice, because I was asked to dances and things, and I remember once I went down and the war had started, and my mother lent me an evening dress, and I remember I went in to the big drawing room and he was there, because I was going to be picked up by a group of people and to go to Winchester for the Hunt Ball. And I never forget when I got into the room, and he was the only one there, and he said to me, "You are beautiful." And he never ever said it again. It's not a thing that he did. There was nobody else in the room, but I never forget it, the way he said it, you know. And then the war came and it was all disaster.
So that was the Second World War?
Yes.
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 Did he go to, did he serve in that war as well?
No, because he'd been very badly wounded in the First World War. And we were sent to Scotland, which is one of the things, the silly things that my father did at times. He sent us to Scotland, and he sent us to stay with a sister of his. And one day we went down to the sea, because it was on an island, and I had my sister with me. When what should come through between the mainland and the island was a German submarine with all the Germans standing on it with their hands up on their heads. And I think it must have not been a very big submarine. There seemed to be about 8 or 10, and I thought it was all the crew and all the officers. So it was, you know, and we went to the village school there, and the next day I wrote to my father, you know, and said, "We've had great excitement here." We were back in Hampshire within 48 hours. He never sent us to Scotland again.
I remember his words on a sofa for two.
A war is coming, be the making of you.
The white cliffs of Dover, they'll see us through.
We'll meet again under skies so blue.
Where was Hugh's first practice?
Heathfield Estate, pretty well all of the Heathfield Estate, thousands of bungalows, but he loved it, and he was very happy here. And then we started all over again, because we had to build up a practice from nothing, and in no time flat, people must have told each other, and from absolutely nothing, and I really mean nothing, I mean, you know, a very small surgeries, and the word got round that he was nice and patient and lived in a very small bungalow for quite a time.
Right.
Because it was difficult to get houses, you know.
After the war?
Yes. And it's difficult for me to really say what it was like, because it was very much still the effect of the war and the effect of that on us as we grew, and you know, and it was, I mean, it was quite messy trying to get this practice together.
Your first surgery with your husband Hugh was a bungalow?
Yes. It was a very small bungalow, and there was a consulting room as you came into the to the place. So they had to pass that and go into the second room, which was slightly bigger, which was the waiting room. It was very difficult. I mean, we had to fight to get the practice together.
Did you have a lot of patients? Was the patients list long?
Hugh gathered patients without doing anything at all. He had only to smile and they'd come and go down on his list. He was very popular in a different way. He was much quieter than my father.
But did it feel strange, sort of starting married life in a bungalow that was also the local surgery?
No, because it was all so desperate. I mean, everything was desperate. Because, you know, there weren't practices to be had. And he had one woman who came in. She was her husband was away to forgive her a bit. But she came in and moved the chair from the front and set it down beside Hugh and said, "You're going to be my personal doctor and I need to be with you at all times," you know. And he didn't say a word. He stood up and he took the chair back to where it was to go, and he said, "I would like you to go and get another doctor."
But they were the pillar of the society, weren't they, the doctors in those days? I mean, they were important.
They were important. They were important. Hugh never made himself important. He really didn't. But he was, like my father, a very charming man. It was the time that we started, there was a certain amount of reverence, if you like, for the doctor. And I mean, I go down to the town now and people stop me and say, you know, he sort of one lady in the stationer's shop, and she's actually just shut down, I think. Hugh delivered all her babies, and the first time she didn't know that he died, and I went in to get the paper because I would go to the hairdressers, and she said, "How's the doctor?" And I said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry to have to tell you that, but he did die." Well, she burst into tears, and he was very popular, actually. But he also was a quiet man. You know, my father wasn't, as you'll probably gather.
So what were the highlights of being the doctor's wife in those days, in the 50s and 60s?
I was proud of him all the time. I couldn't get over, you know, how lucky I was to be married to such a man. I can see absolutely that's where we were, and it would be really lovely if we could perhaps call in and see if the people who are there now knew what happened to the bungalow, and, you know, is the bungalow in the same shape as it was. So I'd very much like to do that. So come on, let's go.
So this is the bungalow, Heather?
This is the bungalow. It hasn't changed any.
Not at all?
Nothing at all. Everything that's here was here that long ago.
Wow, it's incredible, isn't it?
Absolutely, I can't believe it. Oh, incredible memories, because clearer than some since, because it was a bungalow, because it was our first real home.
Shall we go and see if there's anybody in?
Yes, I'd like to very much.
I remember his words on a sofa for two.
A war is coming, be the making of you. so blue.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Dr. Carling's wife.
Oh my God!
Do you remember?
I used to clean for you. Can you remember?
I can remember very well. We didn't really meet.
No,
A
we
lot.
didn't, because you were at Chichester at the teaching academy.
For some of the time.
Yeah.
But you did such a marvellous job, and he always sort of said,
I felt very honoured working for you, I can assure you that. You look amazing. I'm just so pleased to have met you, and I
Oh.
mean that.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
That has-
Thank you for coming to see me.
It was a privilege, and thank you for all you did for Dr. Carling.
Yes, thank you.
You really did.
And remember, there's always an open door for a cup of tea and a cake,
Yes,
right?
yes,
I'm very Scottish.
yes.
What do you think about all that, Heather?
Well, it is just wonderful. Wonderful.
I just can't believe it. I just can't believe
No.
the lady I cleaned for. How many years later I've actually met you?
Yes,
Amazing.
and a great many years later.
Yeah, I won't give you a hug because of the COVID.
Oh, I know, I
But-
know.
Love you lots and thank you again for coming to see me.
Thank you.
Means a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Can you tell me why I've lived this long life? When butter easily slips down from the knife, I felt every emotion through the years.
We went back to the bungalow.
We did indeed. Amazing. And to my great surprise, really, it hadn't changed one iota.
Really?
Everything was exactly the same as it was when we were there so very long a time ago. So it was quite moving, really.
To see a little bungalow like that on a massive estate of bungalows, it seems really weird or strange now that was a doctor's surgery.
Well, absolutely amazing. Really good blast of the past.
So Heather, you married your doctor
Yes,
and then you went on honeymoon to a very special place, didn't you?
yes I did.
Tell me all about that.
Well, it was an island, and my father, who was a doctor in the south of England, had a paper sent to him once a month from Scotland, just to keep in touch with the old days, I suppose. And in it, he saw that the island of Belnahur was for sale. And at that time, he had the money to be able to buy it, and felt that it would be a marvellous place for us as children. We were terribly excited about it. I can remember, sort of telling people we've got an island in Scotland, and it was superb. I used to tease Hugh and say, you love this place, don't you? And he would say yes. And I'd say, Hugh, are you marrying me for my island?
And what did he say? Yes?
Yes.
You arrived on this deserted island, but the cottage was derelict. So
Yeah.
where did you sleep?
We slept in a tent
Oh right, okay.
in the extreme heat. We did stay in the tent because that was the only shade that we had.
So So how long did you spend on the island?
I think it was just over a week, and it depended, of course, on when we could be fetched.
So you
But they
were,
brought bread up to us. One of the fishermen threw bread to us.
you sound like you were a couple of castaways.
Well, I know. I just thought that, but we were, actually.
Just thrown on the island and get on with it.
Well, thrown near our tent.
Was there any stage that Hugh said, this is not a good idea?
Oh, no.
No?
I thought the whole thing was a terribly good idea.
I mean, there's not many people that own a little island in Scotland, is there?
No. We were terribly lucky, really. It was absolutely... I couldn't have found anybody who appreciated it more than Hugh. He was just really excited about everything and wanted to see every blade of grass and, everything on all sides of the island. Absolutely wonderful.
So it's your great-grandchild that has been named after the island?
Yes, that our new baby has been called Belnahua, but for everyday name, she's Bella. You can imagine how thrilled I am about it. It would be wonderful to go back, but if I can't, I'm not going to make a fuss about it. When your cup is empty and dry, and you feel you could sit down and cry, then God, if you please, get down on your knees, and your cup will run over with joy.
The feelings and memories that we share, moments together can't be compared. Such love I could touch and see. When the time has come, let it be.